All right, so before we get to any of the big questions, could you state your name and title for us, please?
Hi, I'm Jim Zook. I'm the Executive Director for the Corn Marketing Program of Michigan and the Michigan Corn Growers Association.
Okay. So what is your background in agriculture?
So my background in agriculture starts when I was just able to walk. My father was a farmer. I was with him every step of the way, and have been involved in agriculture now then for 50 years, a little over 50 years been involved in agriculture.
Okay. If you did, where did you attend college?
So I attended a university in Illinois. That's where I grew up, Illinois State University. It's where I did my undergraduate degree. And then I did my master's degree after being out of college for about 20 years, and did my master's degree at Kansas State University.
Okay. All right, moving on to some of the media questions.
So let's time out here a second.
Okay.
Do you want me to look at you guys or look at the camera? Or do you want me to look over like the shoulder? Or how do you want it?
I'd say probably look at us.
Okay. All right.
It might look a little awkward maybe if you're looking at the camera. Okay.
That's a comment out of question.
Oh, that's fine. We'll wait till he shuts over.
I think maybe he's back.
Okay. So do you think, in your opinion, that the general public is easily or able to easily obtain information on GMOs in the food that they eat?
The individual citizens, if they so desire, there is information around GMO or products that have GMO. There is a new food labeling bill that is going to require companies to put a QR code or some type of information on food labels if they want to obtain more information about whether or not that product has GMOs or to what GMOs are. However, I do believe that the common public does not really truly understand what GMO means. If you truly talk about genetically modified organisms, those are actually, every single living being is genetically modified because we are not identical to either one of our parents. Therefore, genetically, we have a different makeup than our parents do.
Okay. Do you think the majority of the American populace is involved in agriculture?
Actually, the American populace is involved because all of us eat. So because all of us eat at some way, shape, or form, the American people are involved because, farmers produce the products they do for people to consume, and as consumers, they are involved in agriculture.
All right, cool. If anything, what do you think is one of the best things about agriculture?
One of the best things about agriculture, I'll hold it.
All right. Yeah.
You guys do a lot of editing, don't you?
Yeah.
So, let's ask the question again.
What do you think is the best thing about agriculture?
The best thing about agriculture, there's just a variety of pluses about agriculture. Agriculture, if you're involved in it as an employee or somebody within agriculture, you have a lot of freedom to think outside the box, to do various things, and just have a variety of experiences within agriculture. The most prominent about agriculture is the fact that every year our productivity increases. We are doing more with less. We are producing more output on the same unit of input that we have. And this has been going on for decades, almost centuries. And so when you look at the advancements that agriculture has, it is just wide ranging. And with that is we touch so many different sectors in the economy whether it be technology, computers, broadband, the internet. You talk about repairs, electricians, electronics, even you go business people, accountants. You talk about people dealing with legislation, and then you deal with marketers, you deal with suppliers, inputs. And agriculture, you have to have a vast knowledge of many of those topics if you're going to succeed. However, there has been many successful people when they actually prioritize on a specific segment within agriculture and will do very well. Because a person, there's so much information for them to know, individuals need to specialize to become the best at that particular segment.
On the flip side of that, what do you think are some of the negatives of agriculture?
Well, obviously, I don't know if it's a negative or not, but it's hard work. It's not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of ups and downs. There's joy and there's sorrow. With that, if a person's looking for a 40-hour week, agriculture is not that. We have some times when, we don't work that many hours, but there's pretty much the rest of the time. If you get 5-6 hours of sleep a night, you're doing very well. And so it's just that variability that you have in agriculture that not everybody is able to succeed. That's probably the hardest. The hardest is probably not being understood as to why farmers do and why agriculture does what they do, why they maybe treat an animal the way that they have to treat it as far as trying to get it healthy, or whether or not you work a piece of land the way you do that may be different than what the neighbor is. And it's just that misunderstanding that's out there.
Were you going to ask me something?
No, I was going to actually say that's a pretty good bridge into the next question. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about agriculture, not necessarily pertaining to just crops or livestock individually, but a big cloud that you think may still hang over for the public?
Well, I think the public, whether you're in animal agriculture or if you're in row crops or grain or vegetables, I think the American public sometimes think that farmers are out there just over-treating animals with medicines, that they're over-applying pesticides on the fields, that they're over-fertilizing. Agriculture is like any other business. It's a profit and loss. And right now, it's extremely difficult for farmers to be profitable. So farmers are not going to spend on inputs to raise that animal, to raise that gallon of milk, to raise that bushel of corn. They are not going to put on any more inputs than what's necessary to achieve that. And I think that is probably one of the biggest ones. GMOs are very misinterpreted out there. Many people think that the actual pesticide is actually in that seed when it comes for the farmers to plant. They actually think the pesticide that we used in the past is actually right there in that seed, and that is not the case. That is not the truth, and that's what has been miscommunicated to the public. And quite frankly, we in agriculture, if you go back to the negative, we don't talk about what we do enough. That's probably the biggest issue that we have, is we've got to tell our story more. We've got to tell our story better. We've got to get into areas that we're uncomfortable with. We need to go to the city. We love the rural, we love the openness, we love the freedom that's out there. But you know what? The most people who consume our product don't live there. They live in the big cities. They live on the East Coast. They live on the West Coast. And so I think in order for people to understand farmers better, they need to go to where those people are at and try to get a conversation with those people.
Okay. Yeah. This is really awesome. Kind of along with that, in a way. So livestock and crop production are obviously very different, but what, in your opinion, are some of the similarities when it comes to the safety of the food that is produced out of those industries?
Well, as I alluded to in the previous question, is producers are not going to over-medicate on animals. They're not going to over-apply pesticides on the crops. There's regulations that have to be followed. There's testing that has to occur for these foods to enter into the food chain. It is by far the safest food in the world. You take, maybe it's almost like we've almost got it too safe, because we don't, if we get say the flu bug, it seems like it doesn't take much of that virus and all of a sudden we're all sick. Many of us who are older, we could withstand all that because we were exposed to many different germs. Well, because we have increased the safety of our food and how it's handled, how it's prepared, our bodies are just not used to when there are certain viruses that do come along. But within both of it, we are regulated. I mean, there are rules, there are things that we can or can't do. There's, if we apply herbicides, they have to be approved, and the approval process is by USDA as well as it is with EPA. The Food and Drug, they're involved in all of this as well. So there's a number of different agencies that oversee that safety so that the consumers, when they buy that gallon of milk or they buy that carton of eggs, they even buy the cereal, the meat that they purchase, all of that is safe then for them to consume.
Nice. Okay. I don't know, do you want to? Yeah, I guess. In your opinion, do you think that the government should be more or less involved in the production of our food?
So I think one of the big keys that consumers just need to stop and think about the obvious. The obvious is that where the farmers live, whether it's out on the farm in their row crops or they're producing meat or milk, the farmers live in the environment where their productivity goes. So if a consumer thinks that we are going to do anything to jeopardize that environment of which his kids grow or his grandkids come out to visit, it's like, let's just stop and use some common sense about that is not, that they're not going to do anything to jeopardize that. So with that, the farmers having that as the overlying umbrella to where they live, is it necessary for more regulations? No, probably not, because they understand what's at risk if they don't do what's right for the environment, if they don't do what's right for their animals. They know that they could actually put their family at risk with the water that they drink, with the food that they themselves eat as well. And so we are to a point where we are becoming overregulated. These costs, these regulations are cost to farmers. Farmers are at a point right now where if you looked at their income, they would qualify, there'd be many of them that would actually qualify for assistance because they're under the poverty line, because of the price drops that we've seen lately. Getting back to one of the questions you asked earlier about the hardest thing. Well, probably the hardest thing is the income. You might do good one year, and the next year, you really don't have enough money to go buy groceries. There's that up and down that occurs with the farmers as well. But as far as additional regulations, I think that there's regulations that come on that people don't know what the consequences are, and those are burdens to the producers, which eventually are going to be a burden to the American people, because all of a sudden they may have to pay more for food that they're used to getting at a reasonable price, just because it's going to cost more for the farmers to grow that. If it costs more to the farmers to grow it, they're not going to grow it, and therefore there won't be the supply. If the supply is not there and the demand remains the same, well, guess what? If you want that product because there's less supply, you're going to have to pay more for it.
So I know you touched on it a little bit, but what would your response be to the argument that modern agriculture is harming the environment?
I would say that it kind of gets back to what I discussed about the regulations. It's like, just stop, think about it. If it is harming the environment, if it's harming what you drink, if it's going to harm what you eat, that you're going to become sick or that you're going to maybe get a disease over it, stop and think about it. Why would anybody do that? Farmers are not going to do that. So, that I believe is the biggest misconception. It's just like, stop, people, think about it. Let's use some common sense that farmers are not going to jeopardize their environment, because that's where they live. That's where their kids grow up. That's where they hope that their grandkids will be able to come to. And so that is a big misconception that we need to make sure people understand just the common sense behind that statement.
A question that I just thought of, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but a message that I'm getting from you is farming is personal. It's a very personal thing. I guess my question is that a fair statement, that to the farmer, what they do, they really put time and energy, and they think about what they're doing. They care about what they're doing.
That is a very good observation on your part, because you're right. It is personal. When you look at individuals who are farming, if an individual who did not grow up in a farm wanted to go farm, he couldn't. One is because it takes a lot of money to get started. There's a lot of knowledge that you have to have about many, many things, whether it be mechanics, whether it be some of your welding, your electronics, your electricity. You have to be a plant scientist. You have to be a botanist. You have to be a fertility specialist. You have to be a person who understands about insects. And so it is very personal, for the fact that many of these farms have probably been in a family for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations. So it's been kind of passed down to others. And it's one of those that it's just something about when it's in your blood. We don't know why it is, but it's like when it's in your blood, it's a passion. And you're passionate about it, and you'll do whatever you can to make sure that you can pass it on to the next one. It truly is personal, because they got it from somebody else. In other words, they got the operation from somebody else. They know that it's up to them to make sure that they can pass that on to somebody else after them.
So moving, kind of deviating off of those topics, what does the term industrial farming mean to you?
I think the term industrial farming is one that is misused without any justification. I think people want to kind of put it into a corner and make it sound like it's bad. They want people to think, oh, if a family farm is a corporation, because they have to, for tax reasons, They have to in order to pass this farm on to the next generation. So our systems are set up that you have to look at those avenues for your operations to survive. One is to survive within the year, but to survive generationally. That is something that is unfair to farmers. It is strictly just like any other business that has to look at the legal issues, look at the accounting issues and how they can be profitable. And so I look at, when they want to say the term industrial, it's just like, I almost want to say, well, there is no such thing as industrial farming. Because again, your question you just asked it truly is personal. It's truly about the family and passing those on. And so this idea that these are just widgets, that there's no feelings that are involved in the farming operation are just not true.
Just skip over this next one, I think. Sure. Probably.
What is it?
Because it was the, when do you think that, in terms of years, agriculture as a whole underwent a massive technological and ideological change? I think that's like a little bit.
The answer is it evolves, and it evolves with how well farmers are doing. The farmers have actually been profitable because of a new industry created to use one of the major products. And again, because I'm from the corn industry, but the corn industry actually drove a lot of other agriculture. Because there was some money that was made from the farmers from about 05, 06 until about last year, the year before, we saw a huge technological advancement when it comes to their machinery and how they adapt. And just prior to that is when we actually adapted the genetics and the use of genetics in our seeds so that we reduce the amount of pesticides, we reduce the amount of water, we reduce the amount of fertilizer that's necessary because of all of that. So and then again, it all started back in 1935 when we had hybrid seed corn come on. So the answer is it is constantly evolving to be more efficient tomorrow than what we are today.
I guess that made sense. Do you think that the American people care about the future of agriculture?
So I think that's all the more you need to say about that. I think that the American people don't understand the importance of American agriculture. I think that many of the American people that live in the cities think that their food comes from the grocery store. I think the American people don't understand that it all starts with the land, and that from that land is where we actually are able to raise the food for the animals, to raise food for the humans. And because they are so far removed from agriculture, they do not understand that that is the foundation of their life and breath. And the project you're doing, I think, is great, because even if we can touch one person that could understand that, I better pay attention to those farmers. I better make sure that those farmers stay on that land, because if they don't, and they know what's best for that land because they live there, they like to hunt and fish in those areas as well, so they're not going to do anything to jeopardize the wildlife as well. I think that the American people just need to understand that they better care about the American farmer, because without that, they don't have nourishment.
That's a perfect segue into the next question, being, what do you think the future of agriculture is? As in, how do we get there, and who will take us there?
Well, one is that the future it's going to change. It's going to be a little bit different. How we do things today are going to be different than when I grew up. It's going to be the younger generation. It'll be you guys. It'll be your your mind and how it's developed, which your mind has developed differently than the way my mind has, because you've had technology, and you've had technology ever since you were little. I think that will, how you understand that is different than the way I understand that. And there'll be things that you'll be able to do with that technology we never even dreamed of. And I think if we can instill in the younger generation to, well, we have a sign that's at the end of our room here that says, if you think it, it can be achieved. And I truly believe that if there's any way, anything that you think that something can be done, it can be done. And I think that it'll be you guys that will take us to there. What that's going to look like, I don't know, because you guys have a different way of looking at things than we do.
Okay, I know you may have touched on it once or twice, but how difficult would it be for someone to start a first generation farm?
Extremely difficult. A individual who would start farming will have to have other income. They will have to have a way to provide for their family or themselves. They will have to be small. They will have to work with somebody. They may have to be an employee for somebody and gain knowledge from them. That would be the best way, because whoever you go to work with, they've made the mistakes. There's no sense of you guys making them again, so the biggest thing is to learn and listen. It's so easy to come in and, yeah, you've learned this in the book, but it's totally different out there in real life. It will be extremely difficult. There's somewhere you're gonna have to have help along the way, help financially, knowledge, even mental help, because it is tough. I mean, it's tough on the body, it's tough on the mind. How do you get through these low prices? Man, I put all this crop in and I harvest this, the yield wasn't there, the price is down, I don't have enough to pay my bills. There'll be things like that. There'll be, issues around marketing, risk management, all of those. It will be extremely difficult for young people to get started unless they're going to be working into a current existing operation.
Do you think there's any particular reason why the number of farmers is decreasing and the size of farms in terms of acres, I guess, is increasing?
So the one main key ingredient is efficiencies. Agriculture is one of the most efficient businesses that are out there, and we're able to, because of technology, because of engineers that we've been able to make equipment bigger. We realize that when we do that, it's much more efficient to plant that acre of corn or harvest that acre of corn or soybeans or wheat. But it also goes into the livestock sector too. It's just better use of the manpower. Our wages compared to every other country are higher than every other country. And so wage has an effect that has driven us to advance with new technologies as well. And that will continue. It's trying to be the lowest cost producer out there. And that's what technology has done for us. And so, it's going to be that.
So it's pretty evident that there is a shrinking amount of interest in agriculture among millennials. Why do you think this is?
I think a lot of it is they really don't understand all that goes into it. If millennials, because I think of millennials as really being tech savvy. If they really realized what it looks like in the cab of a combine, when you have an iPad that's sitting there as the farmer is watching the markets as he's harvesting his corn. He might even have a second iPad that's in there that shows his drying system that's there that he can actually operate right from the cab of his combine for his grain drying system that may be might be 10 miles away from where they're actually working. The fact that you may have another monitor that's in there that's pulling off of our global positioning system that shows exactly where he is in the field and exactly how well that crop is producing. My vision down the road is that we'll take all of this data that we have, we'll know where the very successful areas are in the field, and we'll know where the very poor areas are. We know exactly how much fertilizer we actually put on that. We know what pesticides we put on that. Oh, by the way, we have our computer accounting that's over here. Well, we know how much that we actually spent on that fertilizer. We know what our fuel is. We know on that given spot that we use this amount of fuel in there. Therefore, when we have people that can be able to pull all that together, we'll know that in this particular spot, we made X number of dollars. Or in this area over here, you know what, we've lost that kind of money. And oh, by the way, because we've been tracking this now for over 10 years, we've never made money in this spot. We've really got to maybe not farm that particular area. I think the younger generation has not been exposed. Not that they don't understand. I think they understand it, but they've just never been exposed to some of the technology that is involved out there. The electronics, I think of that, a huge need that we have for the electronics that's there. So as there are fewer and fewer people, because we've become more efficient out there, because we're trying to reduce our cost of labor, because it costs more to raise a family, so there's not as many families that can make money off of that unit of production. It will be some younger people that will be able to have that expertise and not maybe help this one, but maybe able to help 4 or 5 that are in this particular region. And I think that's something if they could start to see that and see what's available to them. Plant genetics, if you get into the sciences, it'll be things like that. Designing of grain beds. Who knows what the next way that we're actually going to harvest. Are we going to go to robots? Are we actually going to maybe have a little mini robot that's going out into the fields? Are there going to be more robots that we have in the dairy parlors or in the hog buildings? Those are things that are yet to be developed. And I think once the millennials understand that there's a whole new way coming, I think that you'll start to see the interest get back to them.
So this is what I just thought of. When you mentioned some of I think the heads-up displays a lot of people use, how hard is that for farmers to get? Some of the GPS systems and that kind of stuff. So
that is actually very readily available. The challenge will be understanding how to operate those, and they're costly. If an individual has not made, because of the profits that were afforded the individual farmers over the last 10 years, they put that money back in. That's the other item is the farmers, if they make $1, they're going to put that dollar right back into their operation and make it even more efficient next year. So I think that we're going to see a slowdown of the adoption of that because the profitability is not there. But those who are already on that pathway with that will make sure that they stay abreast of the latest and greatest technology.
Okay.
So this is our final question. So for someone who's looking to go into the agriculture industry, what advice do you think you could give them?
To me, agriculture has served me very well. It served my wife and I very well. There has been things and places that I have been with agriculture I never dreamed of. I always wanted to farm, didn't have that opportunity. My dad was a small farmer and was not willing to grow, came about it at the wrong time when we had a major downturn. So my pathway went a different route. It went into the agribusiness side. But from that, I was very blessed and very fortunate. I got involved in the ethanol industry about 20 years ago. And that was a whole new industry that started because of the need to grind more corn that we were producing. You know, for instance, on corn, we have been increasing about 1.7 bushels per year every year since 1936. Okay, that will continue to do that. Well, if we only have the same number of animals that people are eating the meat or the eggs or the milk from, we had to find a new use for corn. The ethanol industry came about. Never in my life, I didn't know anything about it until I got involved with it. 20 years from now, there'll probably be some other new industry that comes about for the next generation. Was it hard work? You bet it was. Spent a lot of hours in the fertilizer chemical seed business. Many hours, get done at midnight, be back working at 4 or 5 in the morning. It's hard work. But I also know that the rewards are great. It goes back to the question you identified about being personal. And for me, it's been my ability to contribute back to make farmers more successful. It's rewarding. You know, there's just one of those things when you help other people out that you get a satisfaction or a feeling of satisfaction that is unlike anything else that's out there. The young kids today, I mean, look at agriculture as that. If you're good, you treat people well, you respect and honor people, there will always be a place for you somewhere in agriculture. Will it be tough? You bet. But you know, you will need to have relationships. You will have to know people. I would encourage any youth to look at agriculture, because I don't care what your interest is. I really don't care what it is, if it's in the science or what it is. Agriculture needs all of those types of people out there. Whatever that is, there is a place for agriculture.
Great closing.
Yeah, that was a really good closer.
Thank you.
I think you guys are doing a good job on your questions. I think you are. And I think the fact that you were thinking of some other ones, that's very observant. So, and this is an appropriate place to ask those too as they come up, you know. So where are you guys going to showcase this at?
I think as of right now, we're trying.